How British scientists are leading the way to prevent the next pandemic. Hilary, what does this mean? What have they done?
Well, a group of scientists are leading the way in making sure that they can make a vaccine prior to the next pandemic taking hold and infecting the globe, if you like. So if you think about the COVID vaccine, that was produced in a miraculous 362 days, whereas formerly it would have taken 5 to 10 years to produce such a vaccine. So that was incredible in itself. But at Porton Down, the top security government lab down there in Wiltshire, scientists are trying to find a vaccine that they could produce, develop and produce in 100 days if disease X, the next pandemic virus, came along. And this is in order to prevent a pandemic taking hold rather than just responding to it once it has hit. So it's really exciting. It means that we'll be much better prepared. When you think about it, there have been so many more highly infectious viruses that have been discovered in the last few years. So things like avian flu, H5N1 avian flu, things like multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, mosquitoes, ticks are bringing other kinds of diseases to the human race.
You hear so much about that now, isn't it?
So this is about preparedness, and it's quite exciting.
OK, very good. Yeah, prep is what it's all about. The conversation continues, of course, Hilary, around face-to-face appointments with GPs. And a lot of people watching this morning will say, I'm desperately trying to get an appointment and I just can't. And they want to speak to someone face-to-face. You might have the Zoom thing to do. It's not quite the same thing.
No, it's never going to be quite the same. In an ideal world, everyone would be able to see their GP face-to-face and spend 20 minutes with them. Unfortunately, the world has changed. It's just like, you know, you'd like to be able to park your car in front of your house in the same street, but that's not possible anymore because demand is just, you know, taking over from supply. So GPs saw 30 million appointments in June of this year. 30 million, that's half the population in 1 month, and there aren't many GPs around. So it is just a question of you can't see all the people face-to-face. So before the pandemic, only about, I suppose, 20% of consultations were done virtually. In the first lockdown during the pandemic, less than 50% of people were seeing doctors face-to-face because of infection control. And the virtual appointment protocol was established by NHS England. Since then, NHS England have been saying GPs need to get back to doing face-to-face appointments, and now 70% are done face-to-face. That leaves 30% that aren't. Now, having said that, everybody who needs a face-to-face should get one. They have the right to get one. And what's happening now is with the virtual appointments is they're triaged. So the GPs will decide, well, look, do I need to see you, or can we discuss this through the screen? Lots of people are quite happy with that. It's time-saving. You can see more people in less time, and you can show a rash on the screen. The GP can diagnose and prescribe. It works for many people, but for the elderly, for the frail, and for those people who really need to see face-to-face, it's still very, very important, and I hope that it will continue. I mean, we still need that face-to-face appointment.
But again, you want it, but you can't get it because the appointments aren't there.
Right.
So it is that sort of
So you might be offered a
circle.
virtual one first, in which case you decide with the GP whether you need to be seen in person, and that's a form of triage, and you still can get that face-to-face after the virtual appointment. But if you haven't got access to a computer, then clearly you have to go to the surgery, make that appointment and say, I need a face-to-face because I can't do it any other way. And sometimes you need to be assertive and say, why do you think you need a face-to-face?
Yeah. Give the reasons and push a little. Yeah.
Politely, of course.
Yes, exactly. Antibiotics, Hilary, there are fears growing that we're just becoming resistant to antibiotics. Where does that leave us? We're talking about prepping for a pandemic, but like this is everyday stuff.
Many scientists and doctors think that this is one of the biggest threats to the human race in the future because we're now faced with so many superbugs that are resistant to most commonly used antibiotics, and all antibiotics in some cases, that we are faced with going back to an era before antibiotics existed in the 30s and 40s of the last century. So that would be horrendous. Already 1.2 million people lose their lives worldwide every year because there is no antibiotic that will treat their infection. And that threat's increasing. So Lord Darcy, who was a former health minister and is a famous surgeon, is heading up this centre that will look into the development and research for providing new antibiotics, which will be more effective again, to prevent this threat. One of the problems is that drug companies, only have a patent for a new antibiotic for 10 years. So when they spend millions on research and development for one antibiotic that's only going to be used for a week by each patient, for example, they don't recoup their cost of research and development. We need to put money back into that and help them out so that they can work on producing new effective antibiotics.
Yeah, and lots of doctors, obviously, they don't prescribe antibiotics anymore. I mean, I remember even years ago, you definitely would have gotten antibiotics quicker.
Sure.
But you don't sense that anymore. You go through every other avenue,
yes,
and that's the last one.
Because over-prescribing is one of the main problems that is driving this resistance. So we need to use them appropriately. And, it's quite difficult to, face with a patient who says, I want antibiotics.
Yeah.
You've got to explain why it may not be appropriate, and that takes time, but it's necessary.
It's necessary. Lots of women calling for more guidance when it comes to exercise during pregnancy.
Yeah.
What you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing.
Yes.
There's a fine line. I think you've got to listen to your own body as well.
You have. I think if someone is in pregnancy and they've always been used to exercise, then it's usually very safe to continue doing what you're doing, provided it's not contact sports, provided you haven't had a previous history of miscarriages. Carry on doing what you're doing. Your body is designed to stay fit and healthy and to resist problems by exercising. So it's important to stay fit both before pregnancy, during pregnancy and after pregnancy. But the Metropolitan University in Cardiff is carrying out some research right now to see what changes go on in a pregnant woman's body, to see which forms of exercise are best, how much exercise, when to take it, and so on. So that's promising. I think better guidance will be forthcoming.
I walked.
Walking
That was
great.
it, all I did. Migraine sufferers, good news for once. They're debilitating. I know that. I've had just a couple, thankfully, but dreadful thing to suffer from.
It is horrible. I've had 2 or 3 in my lifetime. You really don't want them. Some people, of course, get 3 or 4 crippling migraines every month, and it affects their quality of life, means they can't work. And a new drug has been developed called Togepant, which cuts those frequency of migraines by 50%, which is very significant. Now, it's better than any other pill that's been developed for such migraines. The trouble is it costs £8,000 per patient per year.
Oh, wow.
So NICE, the National Institute, will be looking at cost effectiveness and deciding whether it's going to be available on the NHS. But it offers hope for the future, something that could really change people's lives for the better.
Absolutely, it does. OK, Hilary, thank you very much.
Some good news for a change.
A lot happening there, yes.